Deadpool was obviously a load of fun. I've said it's sort of 85–90% perfect movie, and there are things with it that did great with me slightly, mostly in the editing department. The way they jump backwards and forwards in time when they're doing the flashbacks, I really expected that to be a bit more Tank Girl style, where it's kind of like, punch, this is me unconscious, and they just sort of put them in and it felt a little bit arbitrary, not in the places they'd put them in the movie, but in the way they'd done those edits. Perhaps they needed some Wayne's World style wiggly lines, perhaps they needed to do some interesting silly fades using the Deadpool logo. It didn't seem very creative, they just seemed to kind of cut from one page to another, maybe with a slight fade, and I found it a little bit jarring, and I found it took me out a little bit of the narrative rather than lead me through it. Obviously some things were changed about characters, they glossed over some things, they sort of took out all the Weapon X style references, and they changed it and made Vanessa into just a human and things, and I can see why they made a lot of those choices, so I've tried not to let that kind of thing piss me off. I'm a big comic book fan, so sometimes I do want things to be kind of perfect to the pages of the book, and I know that's not going to happen. I think that a lot of those changes were quite justified. The one thing that really was lacking for me is that Deadpool didn't actually seem that crazy. He's supposed to be absolutely nuts, and he does talk to himself, and he does do all the 4th wall breaking and things, but he really wasn't as crazy as I was hoping for. He talks to himself, but he has 2 personalities in him. He has 2 boxes, which are 2 different, distinct personalities that talk in his head, and they took that out, and I felt that that made him far too human and far too normal. Yes, he was crazy, and yeah, it was really fun, and a lot of the comments and the things he said were brilliant, but I just felt like they hadn't quite made him quite Deadpool enough. And I love this movie, don't get me wrong, but even if they'd just taken things like where he's drawing those little cartoons, maybe if he'd held more of those up, maybe if he'd drawn things whenever he's waving his pants as a white flag or something, maybe he'd drawn on those kind of things just to mimic his interaction with the comic book panels that he actually has. And yeah, it's not a comic book, it's a movie, but you still get subtitles, you still get things that could come up. If anyone's seen the fan-made YouTube Deadpool Typical Tuesday, that uses the yellow boxes and has him interacting those in a way that works perfectly, and they're doing it on a budget of about like 50 quid, so it can be done. Hopefully Ryan Reynolds will see that. If he hasn't already, he probably has, he loves Deadpool, and maybe he'll try and incorporate things like that into the next movie, because I think for me it would really help. The biggest problem with the movie, I think, is that it has absolutely no sense of scale when it comes to time. I thought that the time where he leaves Vanessa and goes off and becomes Deadpool and starts his killing spree of revenge, it had been maybe 4 or 6 months. It's only at the end of the movie when she says you've been gone for 2 years that I have any idea that that's the case. They really had nothing to give us a sense of time. Yeah, they had all the shots sort of taking us through his evolution as Deadpool, but that could have been over a couple of weeks. They really didn't give us any frame of reference. Even if they'd got to the point where she says it's been 2 years and he'd kind of said, what the fuck do you mean it's been 2 years? Because he's crazy and he doesn't know, then at least we would have been seeing things from his perspective and that would have made sense. As it was, finding out it's supposed to have been a 2-year period throughout the movie really sort of drew me out of a sense of disbelief. It just took a moment that would have been very touching and made me kind of think, really? 2 years? And sort of start thinking about, retrospectively, what I just watched. And that was a real shame. I think that's probably the biggest flaw with the movie, is that they just didn't ground it in the timeline that well. At the end of the movie, when he puts her into that nice tube kind of case thing, and she really should have got seriously more damage when she hit the ground than she did. She wasn't strapped in, it wasn't like some big bulletproof glass kind of thing, it was a small torture chamber. That was kind of a bit silly to me. It would have made more sense if she'd hit water or something like that, because we know it's airtight. And it did have a hole in it. It'd been quite realistic with the level of damage that human beings had been receiving in the movie up until that point, where it just got a little bit plot convenient with her. It's a fairly minor one, but I was quite sad that there wasn't that much work with the katana swords. I love watching Deadpool with his swords. That for me kind of, it is his signature weapon. Yeah, he's great with guns as well, and I love the way that he kept losing guns and stuff like that, but I would have really liked to have seen more sword fighting, but there's no one for him to really go against with the swords. So maybe in the next movie they can have someone come in who has blades and they can have a good kind of fight. That way maybe we can have some kind of X-23 versus Deadpool thing, because both of them have healing factor and blades, and that would work amazingly. But for me, I did kind of get to the end of the movie and think, oh, he just kind of wore them like a fashion accessory for 80% of the movie. That was a shame, but it's a minor point. It was just something that slightly irked me. I'm not quite sure why Colossus was just metal all of the time. Like when they answer the door and they've just gone to Xavier's house, there's no reason for him to be fully chromed up. Gone, oh, we've done a really nice render of some metal, let's not bother having him without it at all. That's pretty much the only things I saw wrong with the movie. I am slightly confused because now I fancy Ryan Reynolds a bit because he is Deadpool, which is a weird crush to start with anyway, and I think that's more of an issue I should deal with on my own. But overall, the movie is great fun. It is well worth watching. You need to see it, you need to support it, and this proves that R-rated superhero comic book movies are absolutely a thing, and hopefully we're going to get far more of them now. So here's looking forward to the future. Thank you for everyone for making Deadpool and making that happen. Whoever leaked that test footage accidentally on purpose, we love you. If you spotted anything else, or if you think I'm talking complete bullshit, please comment below. You can also subscribe to my channel for more geeky comic book things that amuse me in some way, and you can follow Trista Bytes on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Thanks guys!